More than 2 decades ago, Terrence had imprisoned Victoria in a seaside town for his own selfish desires. And 2 decades later, Stephen imprisoned Terrence in the prison of fiends. This was karma. "Mr. Adams, what do you plan to do next?" Aston asked after Nor left with Terrence and his subordinates. "That's easy. Head to Annapolis and take over the Adams and Phoenix families." "What about the other Beaumont families? There's 10 of them in total." "Since you're there, might as well take them all. The Cassidy family is an exception. Leave them alone for now." When Stephen was sent to the border during Devil Hall's second attack, the Cassidy family in Annapolis had taken his family in and protected them. If it weren't for them, they may not be here right now. He had a principle of repaying kindness with gratitude. Also, clean up the upper-class families in New York City. When Stephen was paralyzed after his duel with Kylan, the upper-class families of New York City had taken the opportunity to stir up trouble. And recently, Harlan, Jim, and their friends had used Edmund's auction for his family as a means of entertainment. That was unforgivable. He would eliminate the scum in New York City and support Yanis's Loomis Hotel and the families of the Golden Triangle. They'd sacrifice themselves in the desert for him. He had to repay them. Hellcrown Palace made their move as soon as they received Stephen's order. Nor, the strongest martial artist in the palace, was bringing Terrence to the prison of fiends in the desert, so the task fell on the other 3 guardians. They swiftly accomplished their mission even without him. In just one night, the palace had taken over 9 Beaumont families in Annapolis. Of course, this had taken place in secret. The Cassidy family in the city didn't know anything about it. Many upper-class families in New York City were ruined, including Harlan and Jim's families. Yanis and the Golden Triangle's families rose to power. No one knew that the palace was behind them. At 5 o'clock the next morning, Stephen woke up to a message from Aston. It read, "Mission complete." Valeria stirred next to him and sat up in bed. She blinked blearily around the room. "Daddy, why are you smiling to yourself?" Kim was swamped with work at the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation. She came home late at night, and she didn't want to disturb Stephen and Valeria, so she slept in the guest room instead. "Because the bad guys were punished," Stephen said. A notification popped up on the screen. Nor had sent him a video. He pressed play, and a rusty building in the middle of the desert came into view. Valeria leaned over, trying to see what Stephen was looking at. "I want to watch too. I want to see what happens to bad people." "Let's watch it together." Stephen shifted his phone and pointed it at Terrence. "This man is Terrence Adams. He's a bad guy who made your grandmother suffer. Daddy brought him to justice and sent him to prison. What do you think?" Valeria clapped and cheered. Stephen ended the video right before Nor entered the prison. The interior was probably gruesome and gory. It wasn't appropriate for children. He had dealt with the Adams family and wrapped up the situation with his deceased escorts' families. He didn't think there was anyone else coming to cause trouble. He could wait for the hidden factions to appear in peace. At this time, the Cassidy and Haynes families had gathered in Washington, D.C. for a meeting. Everyone was present except Kim's parents, Natalie and Kyle. Gordon and Mavis had rushed over with the Haynes family after receiving a call from Helen. The Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation were large companies. It was impossible for them not to be envious of Kim's business. "Since we're all in agreement, we'll take action shortly," Helen said. "Kim only has herself to blame. If she wholeheartedly supported our 2 families, we wouldn't have to go this far. But she insists on staying with that good-for-nothing Stephen." Rebecca smirked. "Why do we need to blame ourselves? We're doing her a favor. With Stephen by her side, her business would have been ruined sooner or later. We're saving her company." She spoke righteously, but she'd been eyeing the 2 companies for some time now. When Kim's business was in their hands, she could come up with a way to get more shares. The rest of the family was thinking the same thing. But first and foremost, they needed Kim to hand over her business. Helen was convinced. Any trace of guilt was washed away. She would be saving Kim's business by taking over. "Everyone's here. We're only missing Kim. We'll call her over and tell her we're holding a joint meeting between our 2 families." "What about her daughter and Victoria?" Gordon asked. Valeria's okay, but Stephen's mother is an outsider, Mavis said. She has no place here. Kim was immensely disappointed in the Cassidy family after what had happened at the hospital, and the last thing she wanted to do was see them again. But it was clear that they weren't afraid of crossing the line. Stephen was still recovering, and this was an important time for her business. If the Cassidy family tried anything, the situation might get out of hand. She put her work on hold and hurried over with Valeria. The Cassidy and Haynes families crowded them the moment they arrived. They looked aggressive. Stephen had arranged for several people to keep an eye on Kim and protect her, but he didn't think too much of the Cassidy family from Los Angeles. Her current status placed her in a position far above the family, so he wouldn't hurt her. Whether or not that was true, Kim was feeling very threatened right now. Why did you call me over? Helen's voice rang out from behind the crowd. Are Kim and Valeria here? What are you all doing? Why are you surrounding her? We are here to hold a joint meeting, not stare at Kim. Everyone dispersed at her scolding. Helen was more enthusiastic than usual today. She pulled Kim along and took her to the conference room. She exchanged pleasantries and struck up a friendly conversation. The family grew increasingly nervous as she dodged the main topic, but Gordon and Mavis weren't worried. With their experience, they knew what Helen was up to. On the surface, it seemed like she was having a pleasant conversation with her granddaughter, but she was actually laying the foundation to segue into the main topic. Sure enough, after a casual chat, Helen changed the topic. She held Kim's hand with a smile and said, The Cassidy and Haynes families are one family. We are based in Los Angeles, while they are based in Santa Ana. Our development will be hindered if we remain separated. So after some discussion, we've come to a unanimous decision. We'll be combining the resources of both of our families. Me, Gordon, and Mavis will oversee their allocation and use them accordingly. Rebecca applauded. Well said, Grandma. I agree, Harry said. Our two families will work together, Gordon explained. With our joint cooperation, we're sure to make a name for ourselves. It's a good idea for our families to develop together, Mavis said. What do you think, Kim? Everyone turned to look at her. Kim didn't know what they were playing at. She considered their suggestion from a standpoint of the head of two big businesses. I think it's worth a try. If our families join forces, we can achieve better results. Since you like the idea so much, you should show your sincerity, Rebecca urged. You're a member of both the Cassidy and the Haynes families. That's right. I'll be personally donating all my resources to make our cooperation a successful one, Linda's husband, Cohen, declared. Me too, Gianna's husband, Michael, announced. I'll be giving up everything I have to the heads of our families. Kelly's husband, Nathan, and Megan's husband, Mark, raised their hands. Count me in. I'm thankful for all your support, Helen said, satisfied. From this moment on, the Cassidy and Haynes families will work together. I believe that in the near future, we'll stand at the peak of our region. Her words were inspiring and motivational. The family gave her a round of applause. What about you, Kim? Harry asked when the room quieted down. Everyone here will be supporting our collaboration. What do you have to offer? Kim had caught on to their scheme the moment Cohen started offering his assets. Their collaboration was a cover-up. The motive was to take over her business. They were trying to guilt her into contributing. What do you have in mind? Helen prompted. Kim thought it over. Everyone has contributed, so how about this? I'll also offer my personal resources. Rome's brother nodded approvingly. That's generous. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Shut it. Why are you so stupid when Rome is so smart? Are you two really brothers? She's trying to get one over on us by playing with words. He was not enlightened. Harry took the liberty of calling Kim out on it. You're clever, Kim. What do you mean when you say you'll be offering your personal resources? Does that mean you won't be giving up the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation? You heard what everyone had to offer, Rebecca said. We are giving up all our assets, but here you are offering your personal resources instead. We're all family here. Why should you be given special treatment? The two families backed her up. If you want to contribute, then you'll have to give up all your assets. You're one of us. You can't expect to be treated differently just because you're successful. She might not consider us family anymore. In that case, we shouldn't force her. Kim wasn't fazed. So you're after the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation. You keep rambling about us being family, but why not come clean and give it to me straight? This collaboration is just an excuse. They looked at each other in embarrassment after being exposed. How could you say that? Helen demanded. Did I say anything wrong? Kim retorted. Fine, you're right. But you said you would offer up your personal resources. The Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation are under your name, so they have to be considered part of your personal resources. Kim was the legal representative of both companies, but she would never hand them over to the Cassidy and Haynes families. That's not happening. I suggest you give up on the idea. She looked around. Natalie and Kyle weren't there. I thought this was a joint meeting. Why aren't my parents here? I guess you were worried that they wouldn't agree with your plan. That's why they weren't at the hospital either. You didn't want them to get in the way. They were even more embarrassed when Kim thoroughly exposed them. Stop stalling, Rebecca said. Our families are big and everyone has agreed. This is a great opportunity to rise up the ranks. You wouldn't want to drag us down, would you? Kim glared at them. Even if I wanted to hand over the two companies, it won't be possible. I'm the legal representative, but I can't make that decision on my own. I'm not the only shareholder. Jasmine, Annika, and the other senior executives held different shares. Their personal shares didn't amount to much, but with so many people, their total shares added up to around 30%. They had the authority to participate in all company matters. And more importantly, the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation had always belonged to Stephen. Everyone saw the two companies as her business, but to her, they would always be his. Without him, neither company would have existed today. Jasmine, Annika, and the other senior executives held different shares, but the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation had always belonged to Stephen. The shareholders aren't the only reason, Kim continued. The Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation belong to Stephen. Who do you think you're fooling? Rebecca asked. You said it yourself, and I've also checked. You're the legal representative. Harry chimed in. Even if they are, you and Stephen are married. His assets are your assets. You have every right to make the decision. Besides, he's disabled, Helen said. What's the point in having two big companies? They're as good as yours. Valeria had been listening quietly in Kim's arms. The Cassidy and Haynes families were bullying her mother. She wouldn't stand for it. She clenched her tiny fist and scowled at everyone in the room. You're all bad guys. I won't let you bully my mommy. Kim had to hold Valeria back when she tried to struggle out of her arms. The Cassidy and Haynes families dismissed her threat. A child could hardly put up a fight. How long are you going to keep up this act? Kim asked. This so-called collaboration is nothing more than an excuse. You just want to take the two companies from me. The family was used to playing dirty tricks to get what they wanted. It didn't take long for them to get over their embarrassment. They felt no shame, even when Kim exposed them. The truth is out, so there's no point in pretending. Helen slammed the table and stood up. We called you here today to take your business off your hands. Look at you. The only person we care about is Stephen. With him by your side, your business will be ruined sooner or later. Why don't you give it to us? We've been treating you well since you were a kid, Mavis said. If it weren't for us, you never would have developed your talent for business. It's not too much to ask for your business as repayment. The incident at the hospital hadn't happened too long ago, but Kim found herself utterly disappointed once again. She was related to these people by blood, but they were always out to get her. Could they really be considered a family at this point? Valeria tugged Kim's sleeve. Mommy, I don't want to be here anymore. I miss Daddy and Grandma. Kim patted her hair. Okay, let's go home. She looked up at the Cassidy and Haynes families. Feel free to discuss your collaboration without me. I can offer my personal resources, but not the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation. Kim stood up and carried Valeria to the door. Hugging Valeria, she turned around and walked out. Helen was in a fluster. We can't let her leave. They hadn't achieved their goal, but there was nothing they could say to stop Kim from leaving. Rebecca was the only one who called her back. Kim, if you leave like this, you'll regret it. Even if you don't care about yourself, you should think about Valeria. Kim turned around. What are you trying to say? She didn't care if they plotted against her, but Valeria was different. If you walk out that door, your daughter's surname will be rescinded. What do you mean by that? Rebecca didn't answer. She went over to her and looked down at Valeria. This little girl is bold and daring, just like Stephen. Kim, let me ask you a question. If she's Stephen's daughter, then why is her last name Cassidy? Why is that any of your concern? Stephen's last name is Adams, and Valeria's last name is Cassidy. Does it matter that they're different? What's the problem? It doesn't concern Rebecca, but it does concern me, Helen said. I'm the head of the Cassidy family. I have a right to rescind any member's surname. She's the daughter of a good-for-nothing, Rebecca added. She doesn't deserve to have our family name. It's a disgrace. The rest of the family agreed. Kim was stunned. There was no limit to their shamelessness. They couldn't force her into handing over her business, so they were using Valeria to threaten her. Helen, Mavis, and Gordon were the heads of their respective families. They had the right to forbid Valeria from taking on either of their family names. If the Cassidy and Haynes surnames weren't allowed, the only other option was Adams. But that was out of the question. Terrence had warned Kim that taking on the Adams surname would be an act of provocation. Stephen had revealed his identity as the commander-in-chief to the Adams family, but things weren't the same as before. His life would be at risk if the Adams family decided to come after him for giving his daughter their surname. In a society that valued reputation and family background, there would be a severe discrimination against Valeria for having a surname that was different from her parents. If you don't mind, you can let her take on my family name, Rome's brother joked. Be quiet, Kim snapped. You're all shameless. You left us with no choice, Helen said. I'll give you one more chance. If you give us your business, we'll let Valeria keep her surname. Or you can give her Rome's surname if you want. But if you choose to walk out that door, then don't blame us for what happens next. You know as well as I do that Valeria's life will be affected if she takes on a different surname from her parents. She'll be made fun of when she's old enough to go to school and mocked when she gets a job. Kim hesitated in the doorway. From her past conflicts with the Cassidy family, she knew that they would own up to their threats. She couldn't let Valeria have a difficult future, but she also couldn't hand over the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation. Rebecca was feeling smug that she'd succeeded in stopping Kim from leaving. You don't have to be anxious. You have plenty of time to think about it. But I don't think your daughter has that luxury. Valeria patted Kim's cheek. It's okay, Mommy. My last name doesn't have to be Cassidy. I want Daddy's last name. Rebecca laughed. Children will be children. They can say anything. Little girl, do you really want Adams as your last name? Valeria nodded seriously. Yes. Sure, as long as it's not Cassidy or Haynes, you can do whatever you want, Kim. I'd like to remind you that children are naive. You're the adult here. You should know how to make sensible choices. The Adams family won't leave you alone if you give her their surname. Valeria interrupted, talking like a young adult. My daddy is the commander-in-chief. They wouldn't dare. She was the youngest person here, but she had a better grasp on the situation than anyone in the room. And children were more honest than adults. But the Cassidy and Haynes families thought she was bragging, a trait that Stephen was known for. Kim, do you and Stephen not know how to raise a child? Mavis asked. Did he teach his own daughter to lie? If he's the commander, he might as well be the Grand Palace Master while he's at it. Kim, you should think this through, Helen advised. We're doing this for your own good. Kim found it laughable that they were threatening her using Valeria and claiming that it was for her own good. We'll give you one night to think about it, Helen went on. We'll be waiting for your answer tomorrow. If I were you, I wouldn't even need to consider it, Rebecca said. If you give us your business, nothing would change. You'd still be the backbone of our family, and Valeria would still be our beloved member. But if you refuse, you'll have to change Valeria's last name to Adams or something else. You'll either be hunted down by the Adams family or face discrimination. I'll think about it, Kim said coldly. The Cassidy and Haynes families were repeatedly crossing the line. Not only had they forced Stephen to donate his kidney and cornea, but they were also threatening to make them in charge of her business by using her daughter against her. Sometimes she wondered if she was really related to these people by blood. Truthfully, there was nothing to think about. She wouldn't be handing over Stephen's 2 companies. As for Valeria's last name, she'd have to come up with another solution.
Do you think she'll agree?
Gordon asked when Kim left with Valeria. It doesn't matter whether she agrees or not, Helen replied. It's not up to her to make the decision. It's already been decided for her.
We just have to wait for good news tomorrow,
Mavis said. Valeria threw herself into Stephen's arms the second she and Kim stepped into the house.
Daddy, we're home!
Stephen sat her on his lap. Welcome home. Did you have fun outside? He noticed that Kim wasn't in high spirits. What's wrong, Kim? Valeria cut in.
Daddy, they bullied Mommy.
Who's they? Kim told him everything that happened with the Cassidy and Haynes families. Stephen wasn't pleased to hear that they'd schemed against her, but he was happy to hear that Valeria wanted to change her last name. You don't have to worry about them. It'll be fine if Valeria takes on my last name. He wasn't around when Kim gave birth to Valeria and named her. Whether Valeria's last name was Cassidy or Adams, it didn't matter to him. He would respect Kim's decision. Stephen, did you forget what happened with Terrence? He warned me not to give her your last name. They'll be knocking on the doors the moment they hear about it. It hadn't been easy for them to reunite and live a normal life. Terrence was cruel and merciless. He was capable of anything, and he wasn't above underhanded methods. In the past, he'd abandoned Victoria for the sake of his position. She wouldn't be surprised if he came after Valeria. Both Castile and Terrence would be more than happy to agree, Stephen said. He'd taken control of the Adams family. They wouldn't dare protest. Their rules and threats didn't mean anything, not anymore. That didn't make Kim feel better. I know you used to be the commander, but you're not in any shape for a direct confrontation with them. I'm just as strong as I was back then. Valeria chimed in excitedly.
The bad guys are afraid of Daddy.
Kim rolled her eyes. I know that. They're so afraid of him that they want to get rid of him for good. Stephen, it's not a bad thing to tell her about your past. But you're not the commander anymore. What if she misunderstands and gets herself in trouble? Stephen kept quiet. Kim was right. He was pretending to be powerless. The world saw him as someone who fell from glory. If Valeria went around telling people that he was an all-powerful commander, they would mock or criticize her for being ignorant.
It's okay, Mommy, Valeria said. Daddy didn't lie. He was telling the truth.
Kim, please trust me one more time. Nothing will happen if you change Valeria's last name to Adams. I've had the Adams family's name since I was born. They never forced me to change it. Not even when I started using this wheelchair. Kim couldn't argue that they didn't protest because he used to be the commander-in-chief, but there was some logic to what he said. After Stephen was paralyzed, they could have come over at any time and forced him to change his last name, but they hadn't. Maybe they really didn't care. Kim was hesitant, so Stephen continued. Kim, trust me, Valeria can take on the Adams family's name. They won't come looking for trouble. Do you really want to hand over the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation after painstakingly developing and expanding the companies? The employees are counting on you. No one can do a better job than you. I was never going to hand them over, Kim said. I just don't know if we should change her last name to Adams or come up with something else. She considered her options for a long time. In the end, she decided to go along with it. Okay, I'll take your word for it. She could only hope that Terrence would be lenient when he found out Valeria was his granddaughter. Stephen was thrilled to hear that. He lifted Valeria up with a bright smile. Do you hear that, Valeria? Mommy's agreed to change your last name. From today onwards, your name will be Valeria Adams. Valeria gave him a serious nod.
I understand. I'm not Valeria Cassidy anymore. I'm Valeria Adams.
Kim couldn't help but laugh as she watched their exchange. According to customs, changing one's name is a big deal. I'm not interested in paying respects to the Adams family's ancestors, so why don't we hold a celebration instead? Stephen suggested. That's a good idea, but let's not make things too grand, Kim said. She was worried that if they held a big party, the news would spread to the Adams family. It'll be fine. We'll keep the celebration on the down low and invite a few friends and relatives. We should invite Mom, Dad, Jasmine, Annika, and Camilla over. That sounds good to me. The next morning, Victoria prepared a table of dishes. Natalie, Kyle, Jasmine, Annika, and Camilla arrived shortly and enjoyed a pleasant chat over a delicious meal. Natalie and Kyle had been keeping a distance from the Cassidy and Haynes families for a while. They weren't happy to find out that their families had used Valeria to threaten Kim into giving up her business. Their impression of Stephen was ever-changing, but he didn't seem as annoying as before as they sat around the dining table as a harmonious family. Meanwhile, Helen, Gordon, and Mavis were waiting for Kim in the conference room. They were certain that she would give in. They waited and waited until it was almost noon. There was still no sign of her. Where is she? Mavis asked impatiently. The morning's almost over. Maybe she ran away with their daughter, Harry suggested. Helen shook her head. Where would she run off to when Stephen's stuck at home in a wheelchair?
Then why isn't she here yet? Rebecca asked anxiously.
Harry, go find out where she is, Helen instructed. He left the room and returned 10 minutes later. She's holding a party at home. It's obvious she doesn't care about what we talked about yesterday. Helen stood up angrily. What? Is she looking down on us? If she doesn't want to come over, then we'll go to her. A violent knock on the door interrupted the celebration of Valeria's new name. Who could it be? Jasmine asked, annoyed. Do they know what time it is? Kim remembered what happened yesterday with the Cassidy and Haynes families. Was it them? I'll open the door, Camilla said, getting up from her seat. Sure enough, it was Helen, Gordon, Mavis, and the rest of the Cassidy and Haynes families. They crowded into the dining hall. Helen looked around. There are so many people here, Kim. If you wanted to hold a party, you should have chosen a better time, don't you think? And why weren't we invited? Are you looking down on your elders? That's right, Mavis echoed. What's the meaning of this? Natalie and Kyle stood up in a panic, acting like two children who had done something wrong. Mom, don't misunderstand, Kyle said. This isn't a party, it's just a gathering. That's why we didn't invite the elders. What are you doing here? Stephen asked. Helen shot him a glare. Be quiet. This is none of your business. We are here for Kim. In the eyes of the Cassidy and Haynes families, Stephen was never in a position to speak. This was even more so after he was injured. Helen ignored Stephen and walked past him to get to Kim. Did you forget what happened yesterday? No, I didn't. If you didn't forget, then tell me your answer. Have you thought about it? The Cassidy and Haynes families turned to look at Kim. They'd been planning for a long time. For them to succeed, they needed her to give in. I have thought it over, Kim replied. Valeria will take on Stephen's last name. Her name will be Valeria Adams. Kim, are you crazy? Did you forget the warning from the Adams family? This is a clear sign of provocation. How do you plan on dealing with the consequences? Helen and the others saw the Adams family as a supreme existence. They could be turned to ashes with the wave of their hand. Gordon shook his head. She's lost it. There's still time to change your mind, Mavis added. You and your daughter can still be saved. No, I've made my decision, Kim said firmly. Her last name will be Adams. What's the problem with my daughter taking on her father's last name? If you insist on going against us, Then don't blame us for what happens next, Helen warned. We'll report this to the Addams family, Mavis said. With so many people and a feast on the table, you're celebrating your daughter's new name, right? Let's see if you can continue when the Addams family finds out. Stephen was annoyed by the unnecessary chit-chat. Then what are you waiting for? Report it. The Addams family won't care. Helen and the others gave him an incredulous look. Where was this confidence coming from? Kim, I'll give you one last chance, Helen said. If you don't take it, you'll regret it. We don't need it, Stephen interrupted. I didn't ask you, I asked Kim. Kim shook her head. Grandma, please head back. Fine. I gave you multiple chances and you took none of them. You've made your decision and I've made mine. Helen turned around and stormed out of the house. The rest of the family followed her out. Rebecca stopped at the door. The Addams family will be coming for you, Kim. Just wait. Okay, we'll be waiting patiently at home, Stephen shot back. Helen was fuming as she walked past the gates. We are contacting the Addams family right now. The rest of the family agreed. But given the prestige of the Addams family, not just anyone could contact them, especially not the Cassidy and Haynes families. They spent more than an hour getting their hands on the phone number of their butler. This was the best they could do with their influence. Before Stephen's wedding, they had never met anyone from the Addams family. Helen made the call with trembling fingers. It was nerve-wracking to speak to a member of the Addams family. When the butler picked up, she spoke humbly and introduced herself politely. I'm the head of the Cassidy family in Los Angeles, Helen Cassidy. I believe you should be aware of my granddaughter and her husband. Who in the Addams family wasn't aware of the grudge between Stephen and Terrence? Yes, I am. What of it? I have something to report. Kim went against Mr. Terrence's wishes and gave her daughter her husband's last name. The butler had gotten in his position because of his brains. He was quick to catch on. The Cassidy family must have ulterior motives for calling him. Okay, and? As he predicted, Helen started chattering and criticizing Kim. He patiently listened, and at the end of her rambling, he asked, And then? What do you mean, and then? Haven't I made it clear that Kim has violated Mr. Terrence's order? Shouldn't you do something about it? The Cassidy family has no right to judge our way of doing things. Helen realized her mistake and quickly apologized. The butler ignored it and continued. Whether Kim chooses to give her daughter the Cassidy last name or Adams' last name is none of your business. It sounds like you want to use us as an excuse to settle this matter. That's blatant disrespect. It was only a phone call, but the anger in the butler's voice sent a chill down Helen's spine. Please calm down. We don't have such intentions. Okay, then our chat ends here. I don't have time for you. Don't call me again for this nonsense. Helen and the others were relieved when the butler hung up and didn't think too much of their call. But they couldn't understand why he didn't care about this, when Terrence had warned Kim not to give her daughter the Addams family's name. Meanwhile, the butler was staring at his phone, perturbed by his conversation with Helen. Initially, he didn't care. Terrence wasn't the head of the Addams family anymore, and whatever warnings he'd given to Kim were no longer valid. But after the call, he realized that the situation wasn't as simple as it seemed. Kim's daughter would take on the Addams surname. This was a big deal. He hurried to report this to Castile. That's good news. There's hope for the revival of our family. The butler was puzzled by his response. What do you mean? The Addams family was now under Stephen's control. One word from him and the family could be ruined at any time. They were walking on eggshells. When Terrence was the head, he committed all kinds of crimes against Mr. Addams and his family. Our family should have long ceased to exist, but Mr. Addams chose to spare us, probably because of our shared bloodline. If he's choosing to give his daughter his last name, that could be a sign that he acknowledges our family. That's a good thing. The butler understood what Castile was trying to get at. He wanted it to secure the connection between the Addams family and the palace. With Stephen on their side, they could branch out and expand across the ocean. Terrence was worth nothing compared to the endless prospects that came with being allies with the palace. "What should we do about this?" the butler asked. As someone who was over 100 years of age and the pillar of the Addams family, Castiel's wisdom had far exceeded that of any other member. "First, this is worth celebrating. We should head to Washington, D.C. and congratulate Mr. Addams. Second, we will be holding a grand celebration. The Beaumont families of Annapolis, as well as the royal and imperial families, must attend. Our branches are scattered across the country. The heads of each branch have to be there in person. Third, I'll be personally hosting the celebration." As expected of the pillar of the Addams family, he was getting up there in age, but his mind worked fast. The future of the Addams family was now in Stephen's hands. If this worked out, he could win Stephen's favor. Even if they couldn't secure their connection with the palace, at least they wouldn't be wiped off the face of the map. "I understand," the butler said. "I'll make arrangements. What about the Cassidy family? They're the only ones who weren't aware of Mr. Addams's identity." "I know. I'll tell Urim about it." While the butler was preparing for the celebration, Castiel gave Urim a call. Even though Urim was the head of the third-ranked family in the country, he was still flattered to receive a call from Castiel. He was surprised to hear that Stephen was the Grand Palace Master, and he'd subdued most of the upper-class families in Annapolis. The Cassidy family were the only ones out of the loop. Urim realized that the palace had left his family alone because they'd taken good care of Kim when Stephen was sent to the border. He also understood why Castiel was personally calling him. He told Castiel that he would be attending and instructed his subordinates to prepare a gift for Valeria. As for the other upper-class families in Annapolis, they were racking their brains, trying to come up with a suitable gift. Helen had no idea that her one phone call had caused a commotion in Annapolis. The upper-class families in Annapolis began to take action. They had one destination, and that was Washington, D.C. The phones in the district's airport had been blowing up all day with requests for an additional private jet route. The administration director was looking over the applications in his office with a frown. "Is there a major event happening in the district? Why are so many applications for private airlines from all over the country?" He couldn't risk offending the applicants, because only those who were rich and of high status were qualified to apply for private airlines. His assistant placed another stack of applications on his desk. The Addams, Phoenix, Cassidy, and other families in Annapolis are also applying. The director stood up in alarm. While the previous applicants were rich and influential, he could politely turn them down to avoid enmity. But the upper-class families in Annapolis were different. One word from them could put an end to his career. He had no way of refusing. And so, airlines from all over the country were open. Private jets flew into the district on the same day. After lunch, Stephen had taken Valeria outside for some fresh air. The numerous planes in the sky caught Valeria's attention. She was amazed by the spectacular scenery. The Addams family had always been high profile. The palace had recently taken them under their command, so Stephen knew why there were so many planes today. Victoria, who was accompanying them, didn't know what was going on. She was a little worried because Helen had given them a strict warning after she left. Stephen noticed her concern. "It's okay, Mom. Everything will work out." The families from afar came to the district by private jets. Those who were closer opted for luxury cars or boats. In less than a day, there was a considerable increase in the district's traffic. The situation on land, the water, and the skies were in full swing. This was the first time something like this had happened in Washington, D.C. The visitors were all from upper-class families, so the government couldn't be careless. They sent out a large number of traffic police officers to ensure their safety. The Cassidy and Haynes families were discussing animatedly about the commotion. "This is crazy. The roads are filled with luxury cars worth tens of millions of dollars. Traffic police officers are escorting them. My car's worth $1 million, but I'm too ashamed to drive today. The piers are flooded with private boats. They say these guests are influential people. There are also private jets crowding the airport. I heard civil aviation is suspending the airport for one day to make room for them." Harry entered the room to give Helen his report. "Castiel Addams is in the district. The heads of the Addams family's branches are also here. And most of the upper-class families in Annapolis have arrived, including the Cassidy family. Not just anyone could make the upper-class families in Annapolis move at the same time.
Why are they gathering here? Helen asked. It would be great if we had a lineup like that.
She, Gordon, and Mavis were envious of their flashy arrival. If they could elevate the status of their respective families, they'd go down in history as the most successful family heads.
We are considered influential families in the district, Gordon said. Why didn't we know anything about this until it happened?
If he succeeded in taking Kim's business, he could have upgraded the Haynes family to a royal family. Most of the guests arriving in the district today were above that rank. It made him even more determined to make her give in. Helen thought about it.
The Addams family are probably here because Valeria's last name was changed. But why are the other families here? Their motives aren't important, Mavis said. This is the first time so many influential guests are visiting the district. Let's wait and get an idea of why they're here before planning our next move.
The airport in Washington, D.C. was packed with private jets. The largest lineup belonged to the 10 Beaumont families from Annapolis. Castile was surrounded by the other family heads. I didn't think I would ever come to the district, Castile said. This is Mr. Adams's home. There must be something special about this place. The family heads were thinking the same thing. Mr. Castile, I'd like to visit someone before the celebration, Urim said. Castile gave him a knowing look. All right, we'll handle the remaining preparations. You don't have to worry about it. Do what you have to do. Thank you. I'll take my leave. Urim and his family parted ways and headed to the Wyvern group. Please tell Miss Kim that an old friend from Annapolis is here to see her. The receptionist could tell that they weren't ordinary guests. He took them to the reception room and went to Kim's office to inform her. Kim didn't know who it could be. She didn't have many friends from Annapolis. Maybe it was Celeste. She opened the door to the reception room and was surprised to see Urim. Dad? She caught herself and changed her words. Sorry, I should call you Mr. Urim now. Why are you here in the district? Unless it was for something important, the Beaumont families in Annapolis rarely came to Washington, D.C. I'm here to apologize, Urim said, voice filled with guilt. He was ashamed of all the times he'd turned down Kim's requests for help. I know I let you down, but given the circumstances, I didn't have a choice. It's okay. You don't have to blame yourself, Kim said with a smile. You're the head of the Cassidy family and you're responsible for them. You shouldn't have to risk their lives for me. Thank you, Kim. Adopting you as my daughter was the best decision I've ever made. I shouldn't have taken that for granted or cut ties with you so easily. I regret it every time I think about the past. Am I still qualified to be your foster father? Kim was at a loss. Not only was Urim asking her if he had the qualifications, he wanted to acknowledge her as his adoptive daughter again. He'd prioritized the survival of his family over her, but that was understandable. When Stephen was sent to the border, it was Urim who'd taken her, Victoria, and Valeria in and protected them. He treated them like they were a real family. Before Kim could agree, Urim interrupted. Never mind. I don't have the qualifications to be your foster father. Being able to see you again is enough for me. He said his goodbyes and exited the office, leaving Kim alone in her confusion. If Urim had acknowledged her as his adoptive daughter again, that would make him the foster father of her husband. And what qualifications could he ever have to deserve that position? After Urim left, Kim received news that besides the Cassidy family, the other 9 Beaumont families were gathering in the district, including the Addams family. They must have found out from Helen that Valeria's last name had been changed. She packed her things and rushed back home. Stephen didn't seem the least bit concerned when Kim told him what had happened. The world is big. The Addams family's free to come and go wherever they want. This is not the time for your big heart. They might be here for Valeria. We decided to change your name 2 days ago, and now they've appeared in the district. Aren't you concerned? What's there to worry about? If I want to give my daughter my last name, do I need their approval? Stephen poked Valeria's cheeks, who was nestled in his arms. Right, Valeria? Daddy's right. Kim sighed in exasperation. Stephen, we need to take precautions. We don't know why they're here. She recalled Urim's visit to the Wyvern group. He sounded like he wanted to connect with her. Maybe she could ask him for assistance. He did have a high status. The Addams family wouldn't be able to ignore the head of the third-ranked family in the country. As for Stephen, the Addams family was the last thing on his mind. He already knew why they were here. There was nothing to worry about. And with so many upper-class families gathering in the district, the hidden factions should make their move after hearing the news. This was his chance to catch them all in one fell swoop. When Kim and Valeria weren't looking, he gave the 4 guardians his instructions. Mr. Castile, should we head to Mr. Adams's home? The Addams family's butler asked. No, we're here to celebrate his daughter's new name. We didn't tell him in advance, so we might disturb him if we suddenly show up. We should prepare beforehand and give him a surprise. That's very thoughtful of you. Many guests are here for the celebration, so the venue has to be grand and spacious. You're right. Our branch in the district can help us find a place that meets these standards. Let's go pay them a visit. The Addams family's branch in Washington, D.C. was curious about all the commotion. Countless upper-class families from around the country were setting foot in the district like a tidal wave. Something serious must have happened. Bryson Adams, the head of the branch, had sent his son Hugh to investigate early in the morning. Have you found anything out? Bryce asked when Hugh came back. No, but I did hear that Castile from the main branch is here. What? We should find a way to contact the main branch as soon as possible and pay our respects. It was a great honor for Castile to visit. The status of their branch would go up significantly, even if he did nothing but sit for 5 minutes. Their branch had been in decline ever since they had a conflict with Stephen. Bryson had been trying to come up with ways to restore his former fame. But we're not qualified to contact the main branch anymore, Hugh said. That was true, and Bryson didn't have a solution. The silence was broken when they heard several cars pulling up to the entrance of their residence. Their subordinate rushed into the room and informed them that a motorcade of luxury cars was outside. Bryson and Hugh exchanged a glance before heading out. A line of luxury cars filled the street. The door to a Lincoln RV opened, and an elderly man with long white hair walked up to the gates, surrounded by a crowd. It was Castile Adams. He was an important member of the main branch, and just as important to the other branches. Bryce and Hugh were overwhelmed by the unexpected visit. They hurriedly opened the gates and greeted Castile. I'm Bryson, the head of the Addams family's branch in Washington, D.C. This is my son, Hugh. If I knew you were coming, I would have come out to welcome you before you arrived. You don't have to be so polite. I came here for your assistance. What do you need help with? We'll do our best. Don't be nervous. It's not difficult. First, I'm looking for a large place to accommodate at least 1,000 people. Can you make arrangements? Yes, we'll handle it. Good. Second, please welcome Stephen and his family over. Bryson and Hugh looked at each other before turning back to Castile. Understood. They'd heard that Kim and Stephen had changed their daughter's last name to Adams. It had already caused a commotion in the district. It had become a bigger deal when the main branch of the Addams family arrived. Everyone, including Bryson and Hugh, speculated that they were here to enforce their family's laws. Stephen and Kim had ignored the rules. They wouldn't let them off. Although Castile made his request with the word please, Bryson and Hugh understood that it was just a formality. He was oddly serious when talking about Stephen and his family. It was obvious that he was displeased that Stephen's daughter had taken on his family name, and he was masking his anger by acting politely. Bryson asked Hugh to find a place that met Castile's standards. Their family had declined, but their influence from the past was still there. It was easy for them to find a place that could accommodate over 1,000 people. After setting up the venue, Bryson took Hugh with him to Stephen's villa. When Stephen was injured after his duel with Kylan, his enemies had come looking for trouble. Among them were Bryson and Hugh. But because of Kim's connection to Urim's family, they'd humiliated him and left it at that. This time, they had Castile's support, so they were confident. They couldn't pass up the opportunity to ridicule Stephen again. Bryson and Hugh kicked open the door to the villa and found Stephen on the first floor. He was surprised to see them again. It had been a long time since they'd come to cause trouble. "It's you two again?" "No need to be nervous," Hugh said. "We're not here to mock you." "Then what are you doing here?" "We came to invite you to the International Trade and Commerce Center at 8 p.m., Bryson informed him. "Will you be coming?" "Why do I have to go?" "Because someone wants to teach you a lesson. Of course, the choice is yours. Whether you attend or not, we don't care. But I don't think you can afford to miss it." Bryson looked at Valeria in Stephen's arms. "Your daughter's quite cute. She'll have a bright future ahead of her. Unfortunately, her short life will come to an end tonight, all because she took on your last name." "You used to be the commander-in-chief," Hugh said. "Everyone was afraid of you. But who would have thought that the once high and mighty commander would be reduced to this state? It must be hard for you. You'll have to rely on a wheelchair for the rest of your life." "If that's all you have to say, then get the hell out of here." Bryson laughed. "You're still as feisty as before. 8 o'clock tonight, don't forget." Stephen contacted Aston after they left and asked about the district's International Trade and Commerce Center. "The Addams family has reserved the entire place for tonight." When Castile arrived in the district, they visited their branch. He most likely gave Bryson and Hugh certain instructions, which they misunderstood. "I'm guessing they'll be holding a celebration to celebrate your daughter's new name." "Okay, I should attend since Castile is being so sincere. Tell them that I'll be there at 8 o'clock tonight." Stephen was planning to bring Kim along, but she gave him a call at 5 in the evening and said she had some business to attend to. She had to work overtime, and she wouldn't be home until late. She told him not to wait up for her. He decided to head to the venue with Valeria and Noor. By the time Kim was done with her work, it was already 7:30 in the evening. While she was organizing the documents on her desk and preparing to go home, Jasmine came into her office looking anxious. "The Addams family booked the International Trade and Commerce Center. They invited Stephen and Valeria to come over at 8 p.m. This was exactly what Kim had been worried about. She quickly gave Stephen a call. "Stephen, where are you?" "I'm at the Trade and Commerce Center." "Are you out of your mind? You know what kind of people the Addams family are. Hurry up and come back here with Valeria." "It'll be fine. Nothing will happen. I've got to go. Talk to you later." Kim was dumbfounded. There were only 20 minutes left until 8. She wouldn't be able to make it in time from here, and even if she did make it, she didn't have the power to stop whatever the Addams family was planning to do. She thought of Urim and dialed his number. "Dad, this is urgent. Stephen and Valeria are in danger." Urim was with Castile and the others at the International Trade and Commerce Center, waiting for Stephen and Valeria when he received a call from Kim. "Take a deep breath, Kim. Slow down and explain what happened." From the urgency in Kim's voice, something serious must be going on. But many upper-class families across the country would be attending the celebration. Castile was also personally overseeing the situation. Putting aside Stephen's identity as the Grand Palace Master, who in their right mind would target Valeria? "It's the Addams family," Kim said. "They're after Stephen and Valeria. You're the only one who can help them." Urim glanced at Castile. He doubted that was true. Kim must have misunderstood. Just as he was about to explain the situation, a commotion sounded downstairs. "They're here," Castile announced. "Let's go out and welcome them." Urim didn't have time, so he quickly said, "Okay, don't worry, Kim. I have something important I'm taking care of. I'm hanging up first." Kim had known Urim for quite some time now. He was a man of his word. Once he agreed to something, he would definitely keep his promise. Bryson's family was waiting at the entrance. The main branch from Annapolis had instructed them to welcome the other upper-class families as representatives of the Addams family and keep an eye out for Stephen and his family. Bryson and Hugh were honored to be given this mission. Soon, all of the guests had arrived. Stephen and his family were the only ones missing. Bryson and Hugh continued to wait at the door. "I don't understand," Hugh said. "Why did Mr. Castile go through so much trouble instead of confronting them directly?" "That's the mindset of those who are superior. Put yourself in Mr. Castile's shoes. Compare his identity with Stephen's. He's not worth Mr. Castile's time. I get it now. Stephen's like those pesky houseflies that you just can't seem to get rid of. Why go through so much hassle when you can sit and wait for them to land within reach? Then you can easily squash them. Bryson nodded in approval. Mr. Castile is also using Stephen to set an example for the rest of the upper-class families. He'll be showing them what happens if anyone dares to cross him. He's thought of everything, Hugh praised. While he's here, learn from him. While they were absorbed in their discussion, Noor pushed Stephen's wheelchair to the entrance of the Trade and Commerce Center. Bryson and Hugh spotted him and sent someone to report to Castile. Your courage is commendable, Hugh said. I thought you wouldn't be coming tonight. You're as bold as ever, Bryson added, jerking his thumb towards the venue. Don't you know why we invited you here? They weren't the only ones who detested Stephen. Their entire branch hated him. If it weren't for him, they would still be the most successful family in the district. Back then, they were free to do whatever they pleased. But now, they were nothing. At that time, they'd wanted to get back at Stephen, but they couldn't because he was the commander-in-chief. And when he was injured, his wife had a connection with Urim's family. They never had an opportunity until Castile came forward. Many upper-class families were here tonight. This was their chance to take revenge. Valeria pouted in Stephen's arms. My daddy is the commander. He's not afraid of you. Little girl, you're behind the times, Bryson mocked. Don't go around telling other people that. You'll be embarrassing yourself. Kylan Gale is the commander, Hugh said. You shouldn't mistake him for someone else. And Stephen, I don't think you know what you're getting yourself into. You violated the Addams family's rules and changed your daughter's last name without permission. Mr. Castile is here tonight to uphold their rules. Are you saying Castile wants to get rid of me? Stephen asked. I doubt he's brave enough to do that. Bryson and Hugh were in disbelief at his comment. This was the pillar of the Addams family they were talking about. He'd been around for more than 100 years, and his martial arts were unfathomable. How dare Stephen look down on him? I really don't know where you get your confidence, Bryson said. Is this your last bout of courage? Because you know you're about to die. Millions of people respect Mr. Castile. Why would he be afraid of you? Look at yourself, Hugh chimed in. There's hardly anything scary about you. Stephen ignored their sarcastic remarks. If we were alone, I wouldn't have let that go. But Valeria is here with us today. So if you apologize, I can let bygones be bygones. Bryson and Hugh looked at each other in surprise. Did I hear you right? You want us to apologize? Yeah, you got it right. You only have one chance. This little girl has saved your lives, Noor added. You should take Mr. Addams up on his offer while you still can. Stop pretending like you're all that, Hugh said. A wise man understands the situation, Bryson said. If you ask me for help, I could put in a good word or two when Mr. Castile comes downstairs. Stephen shrugged. Okay, don't say I didn't give you a chance. The sound of hurried footsteps drew their attention. Castile walked towards them, surrounded by a crowd of upper-class families. Bryson and Hugh rushed over to greet him. Castile ignored them and walked straight to Stephen. He dropped to one knee. The crowd behind him followed suit. Good evening, Mr. Addams, Miss Valeria. Bryson and Hugh were astonished. The pillar of the Addams family had knelt down to Stephen, who was more than 100 years younger, and even addressed him and his daughter with honorifics. What was going on? Congratulations, Miss Valeria. We've prepared a gift for you. $9 billion. Castile's subordinates brought over more than 100 leather boxes, filled to the brim with cash. The economic status of the main branch was evident in how much cash they had been able to put together in the span of a day. Our family owns an island called Peach Blossom Island, Castile continued. I'd like to give that to you as well. Bryson's family was awestruck by his generosity. With a nod from Stephen, Castile and the rest of the Addams family stood aside. The Phoenix family was the next to take the stage. The head of the family got down on one knee and said, Hello, Mr. Addams, Miss Valeria. We've opened an amusement park in the suburbs of Maryland. We'd like to pass ownership to you, Miss Valeria. We also own a castle in Europe and would like to give that to you as well." Then the Cassidy family appeared. Urim knelt in front of Stephen. "It's good to see you again, Mr. Adams, Miss Valeria. I'd like to hand over my family business. Miss Valeria, you can take over at any time when you're of age. I'd also like to give you a cruise ship." Bryson and Hugh looked on in shock. Urim was the head of the prestigious Cassidy family in Annapolis. His family business was their main asset, but he hadn't hesitated to hand it over. Subsequently, the other 7 Beaumont families of Annapolis made their debut. They were also here to congratulate Valeria. Next, it was the imperial and royal families' turn. Then, the rest of the upper-class families made their appearance. Each and every one of them knelt down to Stephen and Valeria like they were the king and princess of a kingdom. No matter how dense Bryson's family was, the scene before them couldn't have been any clearer. All of these families were here to congratulate Valeria on taking the Adams family's name. But what they couldn't figure out was why they'd address Stephen and Valeria with such respect. How had Stephen amassed so much influence when he was disabled? A part of their confusion was clarified when Stephen stood up with Valeria and rolled his shoulders. "It's been a while since I've exercised." Bryson and Hugh were stunned. Someone who had died in the desert and was disabled before said death had not only returned alive and kicking, but he also had recovered fully. It was too much to process all at once. Stephen walked up to them. "You didn't expect this, did you?" "Was it all an act?" Bryson asked, taking a step back. "You recovered a long time ago." "At least you're not that stupid." Something still wasn't right. Stephen may have recovered, but he was a commoner. What influence did he have to make these upper-class families congratulate his daughter? Even the heads of the 10 Beaumont families were present. Bryson recalled Stephen's words just now. He said he would give them a chance. He hadn't been bragging. It had been a legitimate warning. "Why are they treating you so respectfully? What do you have on them? Isn't our current commander-in-chief Kylan Gale?" "Kylan is nothing in front of Mr. Adams," Castile said proudly. "Mr. Adams disposed of his teacher and his fellow students. They were 10 times more formidable than Kylan. And did you hear about what happened in the island state? Mr. Adams was behind that. He's the Grand Palace Master." Bryson and Hugh's faces drained of color. Stephen had never fallen. He'd always been at the peak. No, that wasn't quite right. He was even stronger than before. And they had outright humiliated him without holding back. Bryson and Hugh knelt down and pleaded for Stephen to spare them. Stephen was indifferent. "I already told you that there was only one chance. You didn't take it. It's too late now. We're all adults here. All decisions have consequences." "I told you," Noor said. "You should have taken the opportunity when you had the chance." Stephen glanced at Castile. "I don't want to see anything related to the Adams family's branch in Washington, D.C. again." "I understand. I'll take care of it." Castile sent his people to clean up their branches in the district. Meanwhile, the Cassidy and Haynes families were rushing to the International Trade and Commerce Center. "Are you sure they're having a gathering there?" Helen asked. "Yes, it started at 8 o'clock, Harry replied. "Ask the driver to step on it." When they found out about the gathering, they dropped everything to rush over. This was an opportunity for them to get in touch with the top families of their country. All they needed was one connection. That would be enough. When the Cassidy and Haynes families arrived at the International Trade and Commerce Center, they saw a parking lot packed with luxury cars. The open space in the distance was filled with private planes. The upper-class families were here. If they could get close to at least one of them, their status would soar, and it would be much easier to take over the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation. They could become royal, imperial, or even Beaumont families. With their current status, they did have the same reputation in Washington, D.C., but with so many prestigious upper-class families here, they felt like country bumpkins entering the city for the first time. Helen mustered up her courage. "Let's stop standing around and go in." Just then, Rebecca's phone rang. Kim was calling. "Are you at the International Trade and Commerce Center? Stephen, Valeria, and the Adams family are there. Go and help them." Kim was still worried after contacting Urim. She heard that the Cassidy and Haynes families would be heading to the Trade and Commerce Center. The more people on Stephen and Valeria's side, the less dangerous the situation would be. That was news to Rebecca, but she pretended like she already knew.
Don't worry, we just got here. We're a family, so we won't sit back and do nothing.
Rebecca grinned as she hung up.
Grandma, Kim said Stephen and Valeria are with the Addams family. They probably can't wait to teach them a lesson. That's what they get for being arrogant, Helen said. We should let them suffer a little. That's the only way they'll understand the value of our families. Let's head in.
They entered the building and heard voices coming from further inside. It sounds like they're arguing, Harry pointed out.
That doesn't make sense. Castile's here, Rebecca countered.
Who would raise their voice when he's around? If anyone's shouting, it's probably him.
Let's go in and see, Mavis said. The Addams family taught Stephen a lesson back then, but he still insists on changing his daughter's name. They'll definitely make a big deal out of this. Their reputation is on the line.
The instant they walked into the lobby, they sensed a strong chill in the air. Their eyes widened at the unbelievable scene. Over 1,000 people were in the lobby. The group in the middle was kneeling. Helen and the others recognized Bryson, Hugh, and the rest of their family. The other family were standing to the side and watching impassively. They realized the situation. Stephen had ignored the Addams family's warning and changed his daughter's last name without permission. Washington, D.C. was Bryson's family's territory. The main branch was angry that they'd let this happen and were exacting their punishment. But if Bryson's family was at fault, then the Cassidy and Haynes families shared a part of the blame. They were related to Stephen and his family. Thinking of the terrible consequences that they were about to face, Helen and the others glared at Stephen. They cursed him 10 times over in their heads. That was when they realized something else. Stephen was the only one seated. He was holding Valeria on his lap, looking calm and relaxed. The rest of the upper-class family leaders were standing, including Castile. The Cassidy and Haynes families would be in for a bad time if they were angered by Stephen's disrespect for his elders. Helen went over to Stephen and hit the back of his wheelchair with her cane.
Stephen, what are you doing? You should be kneeling and asking for forgiveness. You're in the wrong, Mavis said. You've implicated another family because of your mistakes. Don't you have a conscience? Get down from your wheelchair and kneel.
The rest of the family joined in with the scolding. Castile was here, and if they didn't make it clear whose side they were on, they would end up like Bryson's family. As for Castile, he watched quietly until he couldn't take it anymore. He slammed his fist on the table nearby. It shattered in half. Who do you think you are? You have no right to tell him what to do. The Cassidy and Haynes families froze when Castile raised his voice. They grew increasingly nervous when all eyes in the room fell on them, making them the center of attention. Fierce gazes bore into them. Many upper-class families started criticizing them. Do you know where this is? How dare you raise your voice and disrespect our boss? Know your place. I dare you to keep going. The Cassidy and Haynes families had never been in a situation like this before. They hurriedly joined Bryson's family on the floor. Please calm down. We apologize for alarming you with our sudden arrival and interrupting your gathering. In hindsight, their actions had been rude. There were so many influential families here. They'd spoken out of turn by scolding Stephen to his face without asking for permission to talk. That was disrespectful to upper-class families. It made sense for them to be angry. Their only option was to apologize and try to get out of this in one piece. At this time, Kim arrived in a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. She'd rushed over from the Wyvern group as fast as she could. She hoped she wasn't too late. She stepped out of the car, took a deep breath, and walked up to the entrance. No one was there to welcome her. Had the gathering already begun? She entered the building, quickening her pace with every step. She paused when she reached the lobby. Thousands of people were inside, surrounding a smaller group in the middle. She recognized Bryson's family and the Cassidy and Haynes families. They were kneeling on the floor. Her gaze shifted to Stephen. He was holding Valeria in his arms. They were also surrounded by the crowd. Her worst fears had come true. The Addams family was here to confront them for changing Valeria's name. Their branch in Washington, D.C., the Cassidy family, and the Haynes family were being punished. Stephen and Valeria's turn would be next. Kim thanked her lucky stars that she'd made it in time. Who knew what would have happened if she was one step too late? She hurried to stand in front of Stephen and Valeria, scanning the crowd. Please don't make things difficult for my family. I'll change my daughter's last name. It won't be Addams anymore. It hadn't been easy for them to reunite as a family. All she wanted was for the peaceful days to continue. She didn't want them to be separated again. No matter what, she had to protect Stephen and Valeria. Valeria needs a last name, Stephen said calmly. It will be Addams. He scanned the crowd. You, and you. Do you have any objections? Those he called out averted their gazes, too afraid to look him in the eye. They would be out of their minds to object. Moreover, Castile would never let it slide if Valeria changed her last name again. Castile realized that Kim had misunderstood. Before he could explain, she whirled around and shouted at Stephen. If you don't want to make things worse, then be quiet. Everyone present was an influential figure, especially the leaders of the Beaumont families and Castile. There was no telling what they would do if they snapped. The three of them could lose their lives if this got out of hand. Stephen shrugged and didn't say anything else. Mr. Urim, on behalf of our father and daughter relationship in the past, can you help us out? Kim pleaded. Please. Urim didn't know how to answer her. Her request had put him in an awkward position. The other upper-class families were puzzled. Kim's husband was obviously the person with the highest authority here, but she was pleading for them to let them go. Castile, with his hundreds of years of wisdom and experience, had an epiphany. He realized that it was imperative for Stephen's identity to be kept a secret. If anyone found out that they were under his command, it would expose him as the Grand Palace Master. You don't have to say anything, Urim. I understand. Miss Kim has expressed her sincerity and would like for her daughter to take on the Addams family's name. We'll leave it at that. This matter ends here. Urim nodded along, grateful for his help. Your daughter can keep her name, Kim. The other upper-class families understood Castile's intention. We agree with Mr. Castile. Thank you, Mr. Castile, Mr. Urim, and everyone else. Kim's gratitude made them nervous. They weren't qualified to receive her thanks. There's no need to be so polite, Castile said hurriedly. Kim was bewildered by their modesty. These upper-class families were more well-mannered and humble than she'd given them credit for. But now wasn't the time to be admiring their manners. They could change their minds at any time. Mr. Castile, Mr. Urim, if there's nothing else, then we'll be taking our leave. Goodbye, Miss Kim. Castile held out his hand to the exit. Kim didn't waste any time. She said her goodbyes to the crowd and pushed Stephen's wheelchair out of the lobby. Castile turned to the Cassidy and Haynes families after they left. Why are you still here? Are you waiting for us to treat you to dinner? Helen and the others looked up at him, too stunned to speak. What a bunch of fools, Urim snapped. Get out of here. That was all they needed to hear. They rushed out of the building, not wanting to be in the same space as those big shots for even a second longer. Noor had followed Kim and Stephen out of the Trade and Commerce Center. Kim mistook him for one of the many bodyguards at the villa. They had to put on a good show in front of her. This was especially important now that the hidden factions were beginning to move after the upper-class families' arrival in the district. Just as Noor was helping Stephen into the car, a voice called out to stop them. Stop right there! It was the Cassidy and Haynes families. Do you have something to tell me, Grandma? Kim asked, turning around. Helen pointed at Stephen. Do you know how dangerous it was today? It was all because of him. He talks big with nothing to show for it, Mavis said. Gordon was still feeling the lingering fear of being in such close proximity to upper-class families. Kim, if you didn't get here in time and asked your foster father for help, None of us would have lived to tell the tale. Rebecca didn't hold back as she mocked Stephen.
Don't you feel ashamed that you needed your wife to save you? Aren't you embarrassed at all?
Harry snickered. Of course he's not. He has no shame. If I were him, I would be too embarrassed to ever show my face again. The Cassidy and Haynes families were disappointed at how things had turned out. They'd come here with the intention of getting to know one or two big shots, but they'd ended up almost losing their lives and had to run away with their tails between their legs.
Kim, you were there too, Helen said. Stephen and his daughter are the biggest burdens. They will only drag you down. We're not plotting against you. We're trying to help you. Stephen, if you have any conscience, then pack your things and leave Kim voluntarily, Rebecca added. You've always been a jinx and a burden.
Valeria waved her fist at Rebecca.
Don't bully my daddy.
She was young, but she understood enough to know that the Cassidy and Haynes families were no match for Stephen. Rebecca scowled at Valeria.
You little brat. You know what? You're always bragging, just like your father.
Rome's brother sauntered up to Stephen. What are you going to do if I really bully your daddy? Just as he was about to kick Stephen's wheelchair, Nor grabbed his collar and tossed him to the curb. Rebecca was infuriated.
Don't you think that was a bit much, Stephen? Your bodyguard can fight, but what's he good for in front of the families inside the Trade and Commerce Center? He'd be too scared to lift a finger.
Want to repeat that? Nora asked, cracking his knuckles. The murderous look in his eyes was enough to make her shut up. Mavis gave him a disdainful look.
Why are you being so aggressive? You're strong, but there is always someone stronger.
Nor found her remark amusing. He could defeat any member of the palace. Stephen was the only exception. Kim was worried that the situation would escalate. She met Nor's gaze. Ignore them. Let's go. Okay. Nor helped Stephen into the car and got into the driver's seat. The Cassidy and Haynes families watched them leave with indignant expressions.
Ever since he married into the family, we've had nothing but bad luck, Helen said. His daughter is a jinx like him, Mavis said.
While they were blaming Stephen, they heard footsteps coming from the Trade and Commerce Center. They stopped mid-sentence and looked around. They were standing by the roadside. They would be in the way once the upper-class families came out. A few minutes later, Castile pushed open the door, surrounded by the same crowd as before. We've met up with our boss, so let's go back. Things might get complicated if we keep staying here. We need to keep his identity a secret, Urim said. We're his subordinates now. This is our first mission. The other upper-class families agreed. Before anyone could leave, the head of the Phoenix family stopped them. Wait, both of you have forgotten something very important. What is it? They haven't accepted the gifts we've brought. Urim sighed. My memory must be failing me. How could I have forgotten about that? It's all because of those idiots, Castile said with a frown. If it weren't for them, the celebration would have ended on a high note. The Cassidy and the Haynes families were hiding a short distance away. They knew that they were the idiots Castile was referring to. They were worried he would come after them like Bryson's family. We'll deal with them some other time. Our priority is to deliver our gifts. We should finish what we came here to do. Helen and the others were relieved when the upper-class families drove off. They stepped out of the alley and onto the streets.
I was wondering why they let Stephen and Valeria go so easily, Helen said. They didn't come here for them.
Gordon looked down the street where the last car had just disappeared into the distance. You heard what they said. They're here to deliver the gifts. Who's the boss that they're talking about? He must be someone important. Mr. Castile is a prominent figure. He would never acknowledge just an ordinary person as his boss.
Grandma, why don't we follow them? Rebecca suggested. If we know where Castile's boss lives, we'll have plenty of other opportunities to visit him again once he's right here in the district.
Helen nodded.
You're right. Let's set off.
The Cassidy and Haynes families got in their respective cars and followed the upper-class families. They weren't sure at first, but they eventually turned down a familiar road.
Aren't we heading in the direction of Kim and Stephen's villa? Helen asked.
Mavis looked out the window.
You're right. What are they doing here?
Their car stopped abruptly, and they almost flew out of their seats.
Why did you stop?
Helen demanded. Harry, who was the driver, pointed up ahead. The upper-class families are parking their cars. He'd stopped with some distance between them, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Helen's eyes widened.
Then the person they're delivering the gifts to is...
She didn't finish that thought, but everyone knew what she was about to say. The atmosphere turned tense. They hadn't given Castile's boss and the receiver of their gifts much thought until now. The upper-class families had stopped near Stephen and Kim's villa. Who else could their boss be?
Maybe it's a coincidence?
Rebecca asked doubtfully.
There are many villas around here.
Helen, Gordon, and Mavis didn't say a word. They stared at the gates and waited for Castile's boss to come outside. Castile, Urim, and the other upper-class families didn't want to get too close to the villa and risk disturbing Stephen's family. The Cassidy and Haynes families watched as they parked their cars and headed for the gates. They held their breaths, waiting for their boss to show up. But it wasn't Stephen and Valeria who appeared. It was a masked group in black uniforms. Bow and arrows were on their backs, and scimitars were strapped to their waists. Castile, the leader of the other group called out. What are you doing here? You haven't received permission for a private meeting with Mr. Adams. I apologize for showing up unannounced. We're here for a reason. What is it? Get to the point. He doesn't have time for small talk. We've prepared gifts for Miss Valeria at the International Trade and Commerce Center, but because we had to part ways abruptly, we didn't have a chance to give them to her. We're here to deliver the gifts. The leader nodded. I see. We'll overlook your intrusion. We'll accept the gifts on behalf of Miss Valeria and deliver them to her. If there's nothing else, you may leave. Thank you. We'll be heading back. The Cassidy and Haynes families watched them get back into their cars. They didn't stick around and drove off before the upper-class families could run into them. They relaxed only when they were on the highway and thought back to what they'd witnessed. They had been too far away to hear their conversation, but they had seen enough to know what was going on. Helen let out a long breath in the back seat. Did you see their uniforms? Their boss is from Hellcrown Palace. Mavis took a minute to calm down before replying. Fortunately, it was a false alarm. I thought, as I said, Stephen is disabled. He wouldn't have that kind of influence. Gordon spoke confidently, but he was just as unnerved as the rest of them. It's a good thing that Stephen and Valeria aren't related to the palace, Rebecca said, trying to calm her pounding heart. I was wondering why there were so many upper-class families showing up out of the blue. They couldn't have come all the way here just for Valeria. There had to be a deeper reason. What we just saw proves it. Only the palace could make so many influential people move at once. The crisis had been resolved, so Kim returned to her busy schedule the next day. She left for work early in the morning, while Victoria went for a stroll around the neighborhood. Stephen, Victoria, and Noor were the only ones left in the villa. Contact Aston for an update. Noor sent Aston a message. He received a reply almost immediately. He says the hidden factions are making their move. So far, he's tracked down the Empire Mercenary Legion, Desert Fox Assassins, Nordic Financial Group, and Sunset Fleet. These organizations are more powerful than Silas and his alliance. All right. It's thanks to Castile and the others for the spontaneous gathering in the district. Pass on my order to the palace. We'll be eliminating all of them. With Stephen's order, Hellcrown Palace began its thunderous operation. Each successful operation was detailed in a report that was sent to the Supreme Leader's desk. The Empire Mercenary Legion, Desert Fox Assassins, Nordic Financial Group, and Sunset Fleet were destroyed. Each report included a signature of the palace. The alliance had been eliminated, but the threat from the hidden factions remained. They were conspiring with the neighboring countries, which posed a serious threat to the United States' national security. They hadn't been able to secure evidence, so they couldn't launch an all-out attack. But with the palace's assistance, most of them were uprooted and wiped out. With them gone, the U.S. would be more stable. It was late at night, but the Supreme Leader was still working at his desk. He was recording the palace's merits, He'd long since guessed the Grand Palace Master's identity, and the Leviathan unit's investigation had confirmed his speculation. The hidden factions were gradually being taken care of, so the Supreme Leader called for a meeting with the 6 highest-ranking officials in the country. Either one of them could decide the fate of the U.S. "I called you over in the middle of the night to make a suggestion," the Supreme Leader announced. "It's time to restore Stephen's identity. His achievements are unprecedented. Does anyone have any objections?" A single pebble could create 1,000 waves. His suggestion caused a heated discussion among the 6 officials. They had heard about the secret reports from the palace. Everyone agreed that Stephen and the palace's achievements were noteworthy. The main point of their discussion was whether or not they should restore his position as the commander-in-chief. Stephen's contributions do deem him worthy of restoring his status and honor, but we have to think about how this will affect the country. We already have a new commander, and that's Kylan. There can only be one commander, and so far he hasn't done anything for us to dismiss him. If we remove him from the position, it'll be disadvantageous to the country. If we don't handle this properly, our enemies could take advantage of this. And what would Kylan think if we did remove him from his position? We can't just have them fight it out again and make the winner the commander. How can we restore Stephen's status in a legitimate manner while keeping Kylan as the commander? The officials had a lot to say, but no one could come up with a solution to the problem. It was hard to choose between Stephen and Kylan. They were the highest-ranking officials in the country. They had to consider all possible aspects before making their decision. The meeting lasted for an entire night. They hadn't been able to make a unanimous decision, even as the sun rose over the horizon. The Supreme Leader suddenly had an idea when he peered out the window at the brightening sky. "I have a suggestion. Stephen's achievements are worth much more than the position of the commander-in-chief. He's worthy of a higher rank." Before Kylan, Stephen was the only commander-in-chief of the U.S. A higher rank could only mean... The officials held their breaths and waited for the Supreme Leader to continue. "What you're thinking is correct. I want to give Stephen the title of Divine Sovereign." Like what had happened with the commander-in-chief position, Stephen wouldn't be taken over the position of Divine Sovereign from anyone. Rather than lineage, only those who had the qualifications could be bestowed this title. "Stephen will be the Divine Sovereign, a position that's on par with mine," the Supreme Leader said. His tone left no room for discussion. The officials burst into applause after a short silence. It was unexpected, but Stephen was worthy of the title. "If no one has any objections, then it's decided. Stephen will be the Divine Sovereign. He'll be in charge of the entire army, including the 4 great generals, Kylan and his students, the Armored Cavalry Battalion, and the 18 guards. He'll be given a fief, and on his territory, he will have unlimited autonomy." The power and influence that came with the Divine Sovereign position was 10 times greater than the commander-in-chief. He had the authority to recruit troops and appoint officials in his own territory without the approval of the highest-ranking officials. None of the officials had any objections. Stephen deserved this position. "Pass on my decree," the Supreme Leader instructed. "We'll hold the ceremony in 3 days. Stephen's contributions make him a hero of our country. We can't neglect him." Following the conclusion of a long meeting, news of the ceremony spread across the country and the world across the ocean. The last time the U.S. had ventured outside its rules and regulations was when it awarded a war hero the title of Commander-in-Chief. This time, they'd once again gone beyond the regulations to confer the title of Divine Sovereign. This position was on the same level as the Supreme Leader. The last time the country had conferred this title was 300 years ago, but that decaying era was long over. More discussions sparked when the government withheld the identity of the soon-to-be sovereign from the public. The officials had done this for a reason. Many hostile factions had been discovered and eliminated, but there were more that had yet to surface. For example, Devil Hall. Discussions surrounding the Divine Sovereign's identity flooded the streets. Who do you think the Divine Sovereign will be? I can't think of anyone except the former Commander Adams and the current Commander Gale. I don't think it's Commander Adams. He's disabled. But it can't be Commander Gale either, right? He won the duel against Commander Adams and defeated Hellcrown Palace, but that doesn't make him worthy of becoming the Divine Sovereign. For ordinary people, this was explosive news. Back when the former commander was awarded his position, his achievements were evident. He'd taken down the alliance of 40 countries and won the war. But the Divine Sovereign was shrouded in mystery. The more mysterious they were, the more curious the public became. Who in the U.S. had the qualifications to take on this position? Who would be conferred the title of the Divine Sovereign? Everyone wanted to know. The position had been empty for 300 years. Even if they hadn't won a war, they would at least be superior to Commander Adams and Commander Gale. Otherwise, what right did they have to become a sovereign? And what right did they have to be on equal footing with the supreme leader? Discussions of the Divine Sovereign were so heated that it quickly spread to Kylan's 4 students. Kylan was training his troops at the military base when his students came running to report the news. Is that true? Someone's going to become the Divine Sovereign? Yeah, everyone's talking about it. Kylan's expression turned solemn. The Divine Sovereign's on par with the Supreme Leader, and they have the authority to mobilize troops, including mine. All of us will be under their control, Kingsley said. Kylan didn't think he would ever be able to serve under someone else. That was why he had that duel with Stephen. It hadn't been easy for him to become the commander-in-chief. The Divine Sovereign had appeared with no publicized identity. He needed to get to the bottom of this. Kylan ended the training session and headed straight for Annapolis. The Leviathan unit came to welcome him. Meeting them was the same as meeting the Supreme Leader. I'm here to ask who the Divine Sovereign will be, Kylan said. As the Commander-in-Chief, I should know about it. What has he done to deserve the position? Kingsley added. Not just anyone can become the Sovereign, Arlett added. Appointing someone as the Sovereign is your decision alone, Raksha said. We have no right to intervene, but you could at least tell us why. If we don't get a clear explanation today, we won't be leaving, Constance said. To Kylan's students, their teacher was invincible. He'd defeated Stephen and the palace in quick succession. If he wasn't qualified to become the Divine Sovereign, then who was? We understand why you're here, the leader of the unit answered. You've accomplished many feats that most wouldn't be capable of, but you're not qualified to be the Divine Sovereign. The Leviathan unit represented the Supreme Leader, but they had the freedom to form their own opinions on certain matters. If that was what they thought, then Kylan was indeed inferior to the Sovereign. But who could it be? A revelation crossed Kylan's mind. Could the Divine Sovereign be a member of the hidden clans? Aside from them, he couldn't think of anyone else who deserved the position. Can you reveal their identity? Kylan requested. I apologize, but their identity is top secret at the moment. However, the ceremony will take place in 3 days. You're invited. Okay, I'll make sure I attend. Kylan didn't know who the position would be given to, but he would find out in 3 days. He would meet the Divine Sovereign at the ceremony and challenge them. After sending Kylan off, the Leviathan unit set off for Washington, D.C. to inform Stephen. They came at the right time. Stephen was with Valeria and Noor at home. Kim and Victoria were out. You want to make me the Sovereign? Stephen asked in surprise. Putting aside the fact that Kylan was the current Commander-in-Chief, his current contributions would make him worthy of returning to his original status. But the Divine Sovereign? He hadn't seen this coming. The Divine Sovereign had immense authority that rivaled the Supreme Leaders. He would even be receiving a large piece of land. It would be his territory to manage, and he had freedom over military recruitment and appointment of officials. And that wasn't the end of it. He had the authority to command the entire army, not just his own subordinates. Kylan and his troops would also be under his command. If the Supreme Leader and the officials had made their decision, that meant they approved of him and deemed him worthy of possessing this level of power. The ceremony will be held in 3 days, the Leviathan unit said. Please be on time to accept the title. Stephen nodded. All right, I'll be there. We'll see you in 3 days' time then. Take care. Congratulations, Mr. Adams, Noor said when the Leviathan unit left. The country finally recognizes you.
Yeah, it wasn't easy, but it's always been my duty to protect our territory.
Daddy, what's a sovereign?
Valeria asked curiously. It's a position. Daddy will be the divine sovereign soon.
Is the divine sovereign very strong?
Yes, he's stronger than the former commander. Valeria wrapped her arms around Stephen's neck.
Daddy is the best.
Do you want to be as strong as your daddy? Nor teased. Valeria blinked up at him.
Yes.
Nor smiled. Then take me as your teacher. You'll know everything about martial arts by the time you grow up. When that time comes, your daddy will be the sovereign and you'll be the commander. How does that sound?
No, I want Daddy to be my teacher.
Stephen laughed. Valeria had to be the only person in the world who could make Nor at a loss for words. As the day went on, news about the divine sovereign continued to spread. Newspapers, magazines, and the internet were filled with guesses about their mysterious identity. Even Kim, who was busy at work, had found out about it. Jasmine had also called her to discuss the hot topic. And that wasn't all. When she went home, Victoria specifically called her into the guest room and quietly closed the door behind them. Kim didn't know why she was acting so sneaky. What's going on, Mom? Victoria held out a newspaper. Read this. There was a long story about the sovereign on the front page. I've heard about it, Kim said. Well, you see, Victoria trailed off, glancing at the door. You don't have to explain, Kim interrupted. I understand. This is a sensitive topic for Stephen. We should avoid talking about it when he's around. Victoria sighed. If this was before, we wouldn't need to tiptoe around him. But even if he makes a full recovery, it's hard to tell if he'll ever return to his previous condition. The Cassidy and Haynes families had even forced him to donate his kidney and cornea. There was no telling how this would affect his body in the future. They were startled when the doorknob turned, and Stephen appeared in the doorway with Valeria. Kim and Victoria exchanged a glance. Had he overheard their conversation? Mom, Kim, so you were home. I thought you two were out.
Mommy, Grandma, what were you doing?
Kim hesitated. Victoria covered for her. We're talking about what to have for dinner.
You're lying,
Valeria accused.
You were talking about the sovereign.
Kim and Victoria looked at each other in dismay. Valeria had no filter. If she heard what they were talking about, then that meant Stephen had heard it all too. While they were thinking about how to explain it to him, Valeria went on.
Mommy, Grandma, you don't have to keep guessing. Daddy's the sovereign, and I'm going to be the commander.
They didn't take Valeria seriously, but she did give them an excuse to change the topic. Kim frowned at Stephen. What are you teaching our daughter? She's young. She'll take everything you say seriously. Victoria agreed with her. If you're bored at home, take her outside for a walk. Kim had lectured Stephen before, but he hadn't realized the extent of the problem until now. If Valeria was playing with the other kids and suddenly declared that her father was the sovereign and she would become the commander, what would they think of her? In a worst-case scenario, she would become an outcast. Stephen would officially become the divine sovereign in 3 days, and he'd still have to keep his identity a secret. Not all of the hidden factions had been taken care of. Yeah, you're right. I won't talk about this kind of stuff with her anymore. Kim didn't reply. She was looking at him like she wanted to say something. What's up? He prompted. Did you read the news? She asked after a pause. Are you talking about the sovereign? Yeah, how do you feel about it? If it weren't for what happened... I know what you're trying to say, but it's fine. My life isn't that different from what it used to be. I'm much more content than before. Really? Kim thought Stephen would be feeling down after reading the news. He'd lost his position as the commander-in-chief so suddenly, and now someone else would be appointed the divine sovereign. That position could have been his. Yeah, at the very least, I don't have to hide my identity anymore, because you already know. And the most important thing is I can spend as much time as I want with my family. Isn't that a good thing? Kim took his hands in hers. I'm glad to hear that. Whether you're the commander, the sovereign, or an ordinary citizen, none of that matters to me. You'll always be the person I fell in love with, and that'll never change.
Stephen squeezed her hand and smiled.
Whoever the government decides to appoint the sovereign has nothing to do with us, Victoria said. Our lives won't be affected, whoever it turns out to be.
At Jan's hideout, his subordinate was monitoring the International Underworld Organization assassination list. "How's it going?" Jan asked. According to the latest statistics, the reward for the divine sovereign of the United States is at the top of the list. It's higher than the bounty for the former commander. Seems like everyone's targeting him. They want to get rid of him as soon as possible. He's more of a threat than the previous commander. But why is everyone so afraid of him when no one knows who he is? I've checked, and it's not Kylan. If it's not him, then the sovereign is someone who's far superior. The former commander was enough to give me a headache, but the sovereign is mysterious and unpredictable. Everyone is plotting against the U.S. because it's over if they get too strong. What should we do about this? Keep investigating the sovereign's identity, Jan instructed. When you figure it out, post an announcement on our platform. Aside from Jan and his team, the other major forces across the ocean were also taking action. Their intelligence agencies utilized all kinds of methods to dig into the identity of the sovereign, but none of them could track down any leads. 2 days passed. It was already the day before the ceremony. It had been 300 years since the last sovereign was appointed. Annapolis had meticulously made preparations for today. Thousands of people would be in attendance. The most popular media agency in the U.S. had obtained permission for an exclusive live broadcast. They saw it as a mission from the government and made it their top priority to deliver. Their staff worked overtime into the early hours of the morning to prepare. In ancient times, the sovereign was a hero who stood side by side with the leader of the United States, but the position was only symbolic in meaning and didn't contain much power to the name. If nothing else, it was an honor with not much security. If the leader wasn't satisfied, they could get rid of the sovereign at any time. But Stephen's title was different. It was a high position of power. His authority and influence were on the same level as the supreme leader. They stood shoulder to shoulder. The media agency published news articles and broadcasted a trailer of the exclusive live broadcast before the ceremony. The wave of promotional activities spread the news far and wide, raising people's expectations. Kim and Victoria were reading the news in the morning. "I didn't know the ceremony would be broadcasted," Kim said. "That shows how important it is."
"We can watch the ceremony without attending. What time does it start tomorrow?"
Victoria asked. Kim checked the schedule. 3 in the afternoon. The officials are keeping the sovereign's identity under wraps. We still don't know who it is, but the extensive preparations and promotions mean that they deserve the title.
"The mystery's making me curious," Victoria said. "We'll see their face tomorrow."
Every citizen was looking forward to the ceremony. No one wanted to miss it, including Kim and Victoria. Their enthusiasm affected Valeria.
Mommy, Grandma, I want to watch too.
Victoria chuckled.
"Okay, we'll watch it together."
"Mom, Kim, I won't be watching the live broadcast with you tomorrow," Stephen said. Kim gave him a worried look. Did he want to stay away from government matters because it would bring back memories? She regretted talking about this with Victoria in front of him. He said he didn't care, but it was easy to move past everything that had happened. "It's nothing serious. I have something to do tomorrow and need to make a trip to Annapolis." Kim and Victoria exchanged a glance. What did Stephen mean by that? The ceremony would be held in Annapolis tomorrow, and coincidentally he'd be heading to the same city. Could it be? They remembered Valeria's words from the other day. She said that Stephen was the sovereign. But on second thought, that didn't make any sense. Ever since Stephen returned to the country, he hadn't wandered far from the house. And on most days, he stayed home. His life was as ordinary as it came. As an elite of the business industry, Kim drew a conclusion fairly quickly. "Are you going to Annapolis to attend the ceremony?" If Stephen wasn't feeling down because of the sovereign, then it was because he wanted to oversee the ceremony. He wasn't the commander-in-chief anymore, but he always held the country close to his heart. He must have been concerned after handing his position to Kylan. In his perspective, Kylan was a general who charged at the front lines. but not a commander who strategized and won from thousands of miles away from the battlefield. The sovereign was a position that was 10 times more authoritative than the commander-in-chief. Stephen wouldn't be able to relax until he assessed whether or not the person had the qualifications with his own eyes. Contrary to Kim's speculations, Stephen had been wondering about how to explain his spontaneous trip to Annapolis. She'd done the work for him. He agreed with her explanation, and neither she nor Victoria asked any more questions. "I'll arrange a private plane for you to make travel more convenient," Kim said. In the evening, the city of Annapolis became lively with guests from around the country. They would be attending the ceremony tomorrow. The military base commanders, 4 great generals, armored cavalry battalion, and Kylan and his students were the ones to first arrive. As more and more big shots from the military came, traffic control began in Annapolis. Many socialites had also been invited to the city for the ceremony. They were either leaders of various industries or had facilitated groundbreaking contributions to the country. Receiving an invitation to the ceremony symbolized the recognition of the officials. The next morning, the countdown to the ceremony officially began. The guests woke up bright and early and headed to the venue to wait for the event to start. The private plane that Kim had arranged for Stephen set off for Annapolis. He arrived at the airport in less than an hour. Almost no one in the bustling city knew that this plane was carrying the nominee for the sovereign title. The Leviathan unit contacted Stephen after his flight landed. They greeted him respectfully. "I apologize, Mr. Adams. The palace has taken care of most of the hidden factions, but there are still organizations that haven't revealed themselves yet. It'll be inconvenient, but you'll have to keep your identity a secret for a bit longer." "It's not a big deal. My personal gains and losses don't matter much when the peace of the country is involved." Stephen had been used to hiding his identity since the war against the Alliance. The only difference was, his family had grown, and they knew more about him than back then. He was content with his current life. The Leviathan unit member held out his hand, inviting him to the car parked near the airport. "Thank you for your magnanimity towards the country and the people. We've prepared a ride for you to the venue. The ceremony will begin at 3 o'clock in the afternoon." Stephen nodded and followed the unit to the car. At 12 in the afternoon, the venue was crowded with guests, eagerly waiting for the ceremony to begin. They were looking forward to seeing the sovereign's face. Many guests were familiar with one another. They divided into smaller groups and discussed enthusiastically. The 4 great generals were chatting with each other when they saw Lionel pass by. They called out to him, treating him with the utmost respect. He was a national treasure, after all, and Stephen himself had acknowledged him. Lionel returned their greeting with a smile. "Long time no see. Have you met up with Mr. Adams yet?" When Stephen returned alive to the country, the 4 great generals had wanted to go see him, but because of their responsibilities at the border, they couldn't leave on such short notice. "No, but we did talk to him on the phone," Dennis said. "He told us to focus on the task at hand and that there would be other opportunities to meet." Lionel chuckled. "That sounds like Mr. Adams I know." "If it weren't for Kylan, Mr. Adams would have been the one to receive the sovereign title," Zachary said indignantly. Dennis, Roslyn, and Jaden shared their sentiments. Lionel shook his head in regret. "It's a shame. If Mr. Adams hadn't been poisoned, he would have been qualified. No one can compare to him when it comes to strength and achievements." Zachary clenched his fists. "If the sovereign doesn't live up to their position, I won't stay quiet." "You need to calm down," Roslyn said. "The officials aren't idiots. They don't make decisions without taking everything into consideration. The sovereign will be worthy of the position. It's not Mr. Adams, but at least there's someone to keep Kylan in check." "To be honest, I've never agreed with having Kylan as our boss, but he's the commander and we're his subordinates," Jaden said. "I'm looking forward to seeing how the sovereign plans to educate him." Dennis was amused by the idea. "It's sort of like an initiation test. If the sovereign succeeds, it proves that they have what it takes to command the army." Lionel listened to their discussion quietly. He already knew the sovereign's identity. The higher-ups of the country had entrusted him with Stephen's recovery. Stephen was skilled, but he couldn't hide his condition from Lionel for long. He found out on his own that Stephen had already recovered and that he was only pretending to be injured. To ensure that their plan to get rid of the hostile factions succeeded, Lionel had volunteered to sign a confidentiality agreement that forbade him from revealing anything to the public, including the 4 great generals. As for Kylan and his students, they weren't sitting around waiting for the ceremony to begin. His students scouted the venue, searching for a clue to the sovereign's identity. They didn't find any leads, but they did see Stephen. They reported this to Kylan. He's at the venue? Doesn't that mean he's a guest? With Stephen's past achievements, he was qualified to be invited to the ceremony. But was it appropriate? The world was built with victors at the center. It was a survival of the fittest. He couldn't understand what the officials were thinking. Do you want to meet with him? Kingsley asked tentatively. Yeah, since we're here, we might as well have a conversation. Stephen wasn't surprised to see Kylan and his students coming his way. The big shots around the country were gathering in Annapolis. He was bound to run into them at some point. Kylan had a rare look of genuine regret on his face. It's a pity that you've been reduced to this state. Is this what the end of a hero's life is like? Are you here to see my miserable state for yourself, Commander Gale? What would be the point in that? I asked my students to give you the Golden Sage salve. Are you using it? Stephen smiled cryptically. The medicine from the hidden clans is indeed very effective. Kylan frowned. How had Stephen guessed his family background from one medicine? But that didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. If you know how effective it is, then use it properly and recover as soon as you can. When you get back to your peak condition, let's have another duel. If you win, I'll return your position. Sure, was all Stephen said. Kingsley was annoyed by his laid-back attitude. What makes you so confident? Mr. Gale defeated the Northern Guardian in a match against the Palace. Nor had accompanied Stephen on his trip to Annapolis. He wasn't wearing his uniform or his mask, so Kylan and his students didn't recognize him. He'd lost to Kylan on purpose, and that one defeat was constantly being shoved in his face. Whether it was the news or gossip, the Northern Guardian's defeat at the hands of Commander Gale was always linked to the palace. Stephen could feel Nor bristling behind him. He signaled for him to not act rashly. I have no interest in the commander-in-chief position. You can keep it. What are you trying to say? Kylan asked. Are you looking down on me? Wait, are you interested in becoming the sovereign? Why are you bothering to argue with him? Kingsley cut in. Being the sovereign is a great honor. Not just anyone can be nominated for the position. He's not what he used to be, Arlette echoed. He's dispirited. It's natural, Raksha said. Anyone else would have been in despair. His competitive spirit has long been worn down, Constance said. Nor fixed Kylan's students with a deadly glare. It took everything he had to resist the urge to teach them a lesson. Stephen glanced back at him. Remember why we're here. The ceremony's about to begin. Let's go and prepare. Nor swallowed his anger and nodded. Just as they were about to leave, Kylan's students blocked their path. What do you want? Nor asked, frustrated. Stephen, accept Mr. Gale's challenge before you leave, Kingsley demanded. If not, then don't even think about leaving. Are you threatening me? Stephen was getting annoyed at the holdup, but he couldn't risk exposing his and Nor's identities. It was almost 3 o'clock. He had to get rid of Kylan and his students and get in contact with the Leviathan unit. A familiar voice drifted through the crowd. Kingsley, is this behavior appropriate of one of the commander's students? You want to get violent? You'll have to get past me first. Zachary came running, followed by the 4 great generals and Lionel. They'd heard the commotion, so they hurried over. Zachary glared at Kylan. You're their teacher. Shouldn't you be keeping them in line? He turned to Kylan's students. If you want to get aggressive, then fight me instead. Kylan's students stepped back warily. Zachary was the most proficient martial artist among the 4 great generals. There were rumors that he was on par with Stephen when he was in peak condition. None of them dared to provoke him. Kylan had been wanting to recruit the 4 great generals, so he didn't have a direct confrontation with them. When it was clear that they wouldn't be trying anything else, the 4 great generals crowded around Stephen. Rosalind blinked back tears. "Mr. Adams, we thought you were dead," he finished with a laugh. "Hate to break it to you, but I'm still alive and kicking." Stephen was cracking jokes, but the 4 great generals couldn't find it in them to laugh along. He was alive, but he'd suffered long-lasting effects from the poison. The last time they saw him alive and well was during his confrontation with the Adams family. So much had changed since then. "Why do the 4 of you look like you're about to burst into tears? I'm fine. Oh, right, that reminds me. You didn't cause any trouble while I was gone, right?" Stephen had been worrying about them for a while. They were like a family, so they knew each other well. With their personalities, it wouldn't have been surprising if they'd acted out of line because they thought he'd died. But he hadn't heard anything serious that had happened with the military since he faked his death. He hoped this meant they were behaving. "No, we've been following your orders and laying low," Dennis replied. "That's good," Stephen said, immensely relieved to hear that. Zachary slammed his fist against the wall. "You've contributed so much to the country. I'm disappointed in the officials." "No, the country doesn't owe me anything." "Mr. Adams is correct," Lionel said. "He was invited as a guest, which is an honor in and of itself. The country recognizes his contributions." Stephen greeted him with a smile. "It's been a long time, Dr. Sloan." The 4 great generals felt slightly better because of Lionel's reasoning, which made sense. Those who were invited to the ceremony today had all contributed greatly to the country. Attending the ceremony was a form of honor. An announcement was broadcasted from the speakers. "The time is now 2:30 p.m. The ceremony is scheduled to begin at 3 p.m. We'd like to ask all guests to take their seats at this time." Kylan left with his students without further conflict. "We should go too," Lionel said. The ceremony was about to begin, and every guest had to take their seats before 3 o'clock. The 4 great generals reluctantly said their goodbyes. "I'll contact you after the ceremony's over," Stephen said. After Lionel and the 4 great generals left, Nor and Stephen disappeared into the crowd. Kylan had taken his seat, but he was searching for Stephen in the audience. All of the guests had contributed to the country, but there was a particular seating arrangement for the ceremony. As the commander-in-chief, he was in the front row with the students. He was curious as to which seat the officials had assigned for Stephen. The 4 great generals were also paying close attention to Stephen's seat. Kylan looked around. There was no sign of him. "I don't see Stephen anywhere." "That's weird," Kingsley said. "He's an honored guest. Why hasn't he taken his seat yet? The seats are almost filled." I wonder what the officials are thinking. "Kingsley, check the guest list and see if Stephen's name is on it." Kingsley left and returned in 10 minutes. His name's not on the list. That piqued Kylan's curiosity further. They let Stephen in, so that means he was invited. Why is he nowhere to be found? Not just anyone could enter the venue. Each guest had a special invitation. Without it, the entry would be denied, including those who presided over a business empire and those whose wealth was as deep as a country's. Stephen couldn't have snuck his way in. Kylan couldn't figure it out, so he dropped the topic. Let's forget about him and focus on the ceremony. Half an hour later, every guest had taken their seats. Preparation for the ceremony was almost complete. The busiest and most nervous was the media agency that had obtained exclusive broadcasting rights. Today's ceremony would be a historic moment that would go down in history. The agency's director had been working there for decades, and he was worried that something would go wrong. He rushed about here and there to make sure the setup was perfect. 10 minutes before 3 o'clock, Kim, Victoria, and Valeria sat in front of the TV, waiting expectantly for the broadcast. Kim had given her employees a day off to encourage them to watch the ceremony.
"Is Daddy going to be on TV?" Valeria asked with anticipation.
"Yeah, he used to be the strongest person in the United States," Kim said. "He's a hero. You'll see him among the guests. She and Victoria were also looking forward to seeing Stephen on TV. The ceremony was a big event, and it was an honor for the officials to invite him. They weren't the only ones waiting for the ceremony to start. People across the country were standing or sitting in front of the TV. The viewership ratings spiked as 3 o'clock came around. Everyone changed the channel to watch the broadcast. The popular TV shows that aired around this time were forgotten. The Cassidy family was also staring at their TV at home. They'd invited the Haynes family to experience the historic event together. Several of the Cassidy family's ancestors had served in the Army, while Gordon and Mavis had retired from the Army. Both of their families had a deep connection to the military.
It's because of people like Commander Gale and the Sovereign that our country has maintained its peace all these years, Helen said. Gordon agreed. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here right now.
Mavis sighed.
It would have been better if we could watch the ceremony up close. We don't meet the standards, Gordon said. Every guest has contributed significantly to the country. Take, for example, the national treasure, Dr. Lionel Sloan.
The Cassidy and Haynes families didn't come close to Lionel's status. If they had, they would have been invited to the ceremony, and even the Addams family would have to treat them with respect. Unfortunately, they didn't see this happening in the near future.
I wouldn't dream of it, Helen said. Those guests are out of our league.
But the younger generation didn't feel the same way.
Are they really? Rebecca asked. I heard Stephen went to Annapolis.
The entire family turned to look at her. Why? Did he go to watch the ceremony? Someone asked.
That's what it looks like, Rebecca said. Kim arranged a private plane for him.
Helen frowned.
What qualifications does that brat have to attend the ceremony? What has he contributed to the country? Mavis said.
Why didn't we know about it beforehand? Gordon asked. Receiving an invitation is a big deal. The officials would have delegated the task of delivering invitations to someone prominent.
The standards are high, so there won't be that many guests, Helen said. When the broadcast begins, they'll show the audience at some point. We'll check if Stephen is really among the guests.
The world across the ocean was also focusing on the ceremony. It was a milestone in United States history. Everyone's eyes were glued to the broadcast, waiting eagerly for it to begin. At this time, Stephen was in a room backstage. The Leviathan unit was standing guard, maintaining the secrecy of the internal situation. The staff was helping Stephen with his uniform, paying close attention to every detail. He glanced at the clock. It was already 2:55 in the afternoon. There were 5 minutes left until the ceremony officially began. A member of the Leviathan unit knocked and came into the room. Mr. Adams, are you ready?
Yes, we can start at any time.
The audience was watching the stage closely. The Sovereign had yet to appear. The Leviathan unit was standing around the golden-rimmed stage below. Their aura had been steadily seeping into the hall since they arrived. It had been 3 centuries since the last Divine Sovereign. This ancient venue hadn't been opened since then. Today's ceremony marked the end of the previous era and the beginning of another.